Welcome to Lesson 3 of Section 1 of the BJCP training program from Brewers Anonymous. This section is mostly dedicated to the introduction of the BJCP and their history, but this lesson kind of stands on its own, but we included it in Section 1 because we wanted to get it to you early. This is the first form of homework, in air quotes, that you can't see me doing, that we wanted to introduce now because it's the additional reading that we're suggesting to go along with this course material. And with it being a set of books we're suggesting, it seemed appropriate to let you know right off the bat to get started and kind of maybe get started on that reading as you go through these online lessons as well. Now, I'm going to start off by saying this is a far shorter list than what the BJCP has published as suggested. I don't want to say required, suggested additional reading. They have a list of 62 additional reading items, and mostly all of them books. This significantly narrows that down. In fact, this is kind of what we consider the essentials down to the helpful. So if you don't get to all of these, if you start at the beginning and get as far as you're comfortable with and think you know the information well enough to take the exams, that is entirely up to you. This is again a suggestion, starting with the most heavily suggested reading, ending with the not unhelpful, just a little more additional help. So let's get started and get into this list. So the first book is a book that I think almost every brewer has either seen, heard about, or maybe have already read. In fact, you might have already read this and it might already be off your list. It's How to Brew, current 4th edition by John Palmer. Even if you're an experienced brewer but kind of forget some of the more minutia, the details, some of the science that you understand but don't directly apply to brewing, it might be worth going through this book again to refresh your memory, because there is a lot of information in this book that appears in some sort of form in the exam, the entrance exam I'm talking about. And chances are you may already have a copy of this, or if you're in a brewing club, you know someone that does it you can borrow. Should be easy to find. What I didn't mention is that the links to all these books will be in the notes below here. They're not any kind of affiliate links of any kind. I'm not promoting anybody to make any money. They're there for ease of you to find. So feel safe in clicking those links that they go directly to Amazon without anything in between this and those listings. The next set after that we would suggest is the Brewing Elements series. And this will cover a lot of the brewing process as well, but broken down into its 4 components, as you can see there. The 4 books are Water, A Comprehensive Guide for Brewers is its full name, written by Colin Kaminsky and again, John Palmer. Malt, A Practical Guide from Field to Brewhouse by John Mallett. For the Love of Hops, A Practical Guide to Aroma, Bitterness, and Culture of Hops by Stan Hieronymus. And then finally, Yeast, A Practical Guide to Beer Fermentation by Chris White and Jamel Zainasheff. I can tell you from a personal perspective, they're substantially sized books and a little intimidating when you hold them in your hands before you open the cover. And I'm not the fastest reader or have the greatest attention span to begin with, but I will say from my perspective with that background, once I got rolling in these books, they actually go pretty fast and they're incredibly detailed with a ton of information in them. So even though, like I said, picking them up off the shelf might seem a little intimidating, I think once you get into it, especially when you're interested in brewing and the science behind it and what's happening as you're doing it, they're actually a pretty fascinating and fairly quick feeling read. Now, last in that particular subject of brewing and the brewing process is the Principles of Brewing Science by George Fix. This is a book I actually have all the books that we're talking about in this lesson. This is a book I have, but use more as a reference. I haven't read it cover to cover. I tend to need an answer to something or want to find a piece of information and go to the index and look up what page or pages I need to read. And it's actually served me really well in that. I do believe it's getting harder to find this book. I'm not sure if it's out of print or first prints, or I should say, edition prints of them are not as large as they were before. They're not expensive. Chances are you may have to buy a used copy of it if you buy through Amazon. It's been a really good reference guide for me, not only for the exam, which I did use it quite a bit, even preparing for the judging exam, But beyond that, in brewing, sometimes there's just something I cannot figure out in the description I'm giving my fellow brewers in my homebrew club are not getting me answers. This has helped me maybe not get the direct answer, but lead me to that answer. So actually, I think it's been a good book, worthwhile of not only purchasing, but if it takes a little bit of effort to find it, I think it is worth the time. Now, moving on to the subject of recipe formulation. Not too many questions in the entrance exam are going to directly address recipe formulation, though it will, but it usually would be style specific, and you can probably find the answer quickly in the guidelines with this being an open book test. But if you want to go into the exam with as much base knowledge to avoid having to look things up, which is something I highly suggest, going through a couple of these books can help you with that. And the first one is Designing Great Beers by Ray Daniels. This book and the other book I'm going to suggest in this subject of recipe formulation, I think are books that are very familiar to brewers already. And that second book is Brewing Classic Styles by Jamil Zainasheff and John Palmer. I think almost everybody, when you decide to become a brewer, you wake up and under your pillow somehow is a Brewing Classic Styles or a copy of that. Now, interestingly enough, Jamil Zainasheff on the different podcasts he does with the Brewing Network and in other places online has mentioned he's working on 4 books right now. And I don't know that he's actually said that Brewing Classic Styles, a sequel to Brewing Classic Styles, I should say, is in the works. That might be something everyone assumed. I think it is a safe assumption if he hasn't said it. So maybe by the time you're viewing this lesson, if it's well past the time it was posted and you see an updated Brewing Classic Styles, if it were me, I would get that particular one if it exists. Again, I have no idea if it's coming or not, but I just wanted to put that out there. If you see a Brewing Classic Styles 2024 or whatever it ends up being called, if it exists, I would go towards that one as my study material. Now on the subject of beer evaluation, there's one classic book and one fairly new book that will both benefit anyone taking this course. First, a new one. It's called The Unofficial Guide to Judging Beer by Devin Neller. Right now, this is the closest thing to a written companion to this course currently available. It's not as focused on the exam material as this course is, but it does cover a lot of the same material that is on the exams, like ingredients, the brewing process, off flavors, the guidelines, and it does refer to the BJCP guidelines and methodologies of judging throughout this book. Its main focus is on evaluating beer and the judging process, and it's a really good resource if are very new to judging, if you're just starting out, if you have just learned about judging and want to know more. I would actually say start with this book, then come back to this course. It gives a lot of examples of the evaluation process and examples of score sheets for various beer styles and at various levels of quality. If you kind of have some of that experience already, it's a good book to go throughout the course. I wouldn't stop the course and read this. I kind of read the companion material that matches up to what we're studying. In fact, I would say that's probably even more so suggested to do when we get to the tasting exam study material in this course, because that, again, was what the main focus of this book is. And then there's the one book that comes up repeatedly, not only for brewers and people wanting to judge beer, but for beer fans in general may be familiar with this book, and that's the book Tasting Beer, An Insider's Guide to the World's Greatest Drink by Randy Mosier. This book has been around for a while, and although things have changed in brewing technology and the way we brew and the way ingredients are grown and harvested, one thing that hasn't changed is how our senses work. We still have a sense of smell, a sense of sight, a sense of taste. Everything that goes into tasting and evaluating beer in this book explores all of that in a lot of detail. If that's something that is more what you're looking to expand on in your judging journey, in your judging education, this will definitely give you more than this course is going to give you alone. So with that idea, I definitely suggest looking at this book as well. Along with the evaluation process, if you're looking for inspiration to enhance your style, your descriptions of your evaluation, anything by Michael Jackson, and the beer hunter Michael Jackson, not that other guy. He is, I'm not even sure what to call him, the Shakespeare of beer, the The way he describes beer has been unmatched and is very inspiring to read if you're struggling how to describe beers. He describes beers when I was first studying for my judging exam and looking for better and additional ways to describe beers. He described beers in ways that never even crossed my mind, and I think really, really helped me pass that judging exam and helped me be a better judge, being able to describe things in a different way than I was doing before. Now, unfortunately, he did pass away in 2007, and his books do not seem to be republished. So these are getting fewer and far between to find. And all of them at this point, I believe, are going to be used copies, but well worth the hunt to get you inspired to look at beer a different way, describe beers in different ways. And any of these, if you find any of these, it's worth reading. His main books are The New World Guide to Beer, Beer Companion, Ultimate Beer, Great Beer Guide, and Michael Jackson's Great Beers of Belgium. So if you can find one of those, any edition, there's been several editions, I think, of all of these, except maybe the Belgian one, it's worth reading because no matter how beer styles have changed, the way he describes them in any generation is definitely worth taking a look at. All right. That not only does it for this lesson, but it does it for this section. Let me add, though, to the end of this lesson, like I said, this set of books, this suggestion of additional reading, this is only a curated list that we've taken from the much, much larger list that the BJCP has put together for their training documentation. So if you're interested in what that entire list is, I'm putting the link to that in the notes below this video. So you can check that out, see if there's more titles on there that you're interested in reading to prepare for the exams. All right, that is it for section 1. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next section.